All right, so I'm Jon DeClerck. I'm a technical consultant for Purina Animal Nutrition. I live in College Station, and I service kind of central and South Texas, and then southern Louisiana as well. So I'm going to talk today about building a TMR, or a total mixed ration, and the importance of supplementing our commodities to build a balanced ration as well. So I've got three keys in terms of building a TMR, and if you don't remember anything else from my presentation, I hope you remember these three principles. And the first is that our commodities or our feedstuffs are inherently deficient in many of the nutrients that are essential for profitable production, and so we've got to supplement those commodities to create a balanced ration. The second is that we need to customize a program that fits for you. All right, we can't copy your neighbor's program. We can't copy somebody from the other side of the state or a friend. We've got to be able to leverage your feedstuff inventory and your management capabilities to build a feed program that will optimize your cattle's genetic potential for performance. And then my third take-home message is that Purina has a full line of research-tested and field-proven products that will work for you no matter your circumstance. So first, let's talk about the purpose of ration balancing. All right, this is becoming pretty important because of honestly, feeding commodities can be very cost effective. Maybe you've got homegrown forages or grain, or maybe you just got an elevator or co-op that gave you a great deal on some of those feedstuffs. But this can be a very effective way to feed cattle. And so our objective of building a ration is not only to deliver these commodities in the appropriate proportion, but we've also got to try to supplement these as well. Unfortunately, there's no super feed stuff out there that has all the nutrients that cattle eat. If you're like me, I love steak and ice cream. I wish I could do nothing but eat steak and ice cream every single day. But unfortunately, I got to get some green stuff into my diet if I'm going to be somewhat healthy, or else I'm probably going to not like the results. And so as we start talking about most of our commodity feeds, we got to sometimes add some protein. Generally, we're shooting for our receiving and growing diets to be somewhere between 12 and 14% protein, and our grains and our hays and some of our roughages are generally a little bit closer to 8%, so we might need to bolster performance that way. The other thing sometimes that I really look at are vitamins and minerals. Copper and zinc and phosphorus are going to be pretty well deficient in most of our feedstuffs throughout the year. So it's obviously important that we create a balanced ration. You might be asking, like, okay, what do I need to put together for a supplement to create a balanced ration? Well, the first thing are going to be, as I mentioned before, vitamins and minerals. This is one of the best investments we can make as cattlemen. It doesn't matter what the stage of production is. You're going to get a tremendous return on investment by getting a high-quality vitamin and mineral program. I'm sure Dr. Hawkins is going to touch on this in his topic, but we're not only going to bolster the performance of those cattle and enhance their gain, we're also going to strengthen their immune system and give them a better ability to fight off those pathogens if they're ever faced with any of those. The next thing that I like to put into a balancer is going to be a protein source, okay? And so even if I've got a high protein commodity, whether that maybe be dried distiller's grains or it might be whole cottonseed, the data is pretty clear that we can create synergy by putting a second protein source in there, particularly if it's a high quality protein source. You see, in cattle, protein is digested in two different places. It's going to be digested in the rumen, and it can be digested in the small intestine. All right? Now, both are important. The protein that's digested in the rumen is going to be a fuel source for the microbes or the bugs. All right? So they're going to use that protein to proliferate, and all of a sudden they're going to be more efficient in digesting the fiber and the starch, and they're going to return more energy to that animal that's going to empower more impressive gains. So we definitely need protein to be digested in the rumen. But protein digested in the small intestine is important too, because more of that protein is actually returned to the animal, and that protein is used as a building blocks to create the muscle mass and that lean tissue growth that we need for those developing cattle. So I need protein to be digested in both places. And if I've got one protein source in a commodity, the chances is the balance of that protein digestion is a little off. And so by adding protein in a balancer or in a supplement, that gives me an opportunity to get the right kind of ratio and symmetry that I need to optimize my cattle's performance. The next thing that I like to add is fat. I mean, we can add fat in some of our balancers if we want to. We know fat is extremely energy dense. Energy is going to dictate the gain of our cattle, so this is a good opportunity to look at in a balancer. We can add soluble sugars. I'm sure that most of us know that lots of times when we're starting cattle on feed or using a creep feed, we put a lot of molasses on there. Not only because if it tastes good or it's palatable for those calves, but it's because it's got a lot of soluble sugars in there. And soluble sugars are great for rumen health and development. Again, we're talking about 5, 6, 7 weight calves here where they got a growing rumen here that we want to make sure that we can strengthen that gut integrity and and get more development on the inner lining of the rumen. If we do that, we're actually going to see more impressive digestibility or absorption of our nutrients, and that's going to empower more effective gains as well. So soluble sugars is something we can add in a balancer. And then finally, we can add feed additives too, right? We could add essential oils. I can put in ionophores if I wanted to, like Rumensin or Bovatec, and then I could also add any antibiotics like Tylan or CTC, depending on what the specific circumstances call for. So now there's obviously some hurdles when it comes to diet formulation. All right, there's a reason that it can be pretty challenging. And most of the time when I talk to a lot of my customers, I'll give them some diets and they'll say, man, why do you got 5 different diets for my cattle? Like, what's the big difference? Can't I just feed them all the same thing? And the answer is, in a perfect world, no. We want to use different diets. And that's because cattle are constantly changing their metabolic requirements. All right, that 5-weight calf has got a different metabolic requirement than that 7-weight calf. All right, it's the same as people. If you're lucky enough in your family that you got maybe a high school boy in your group, you can attest to the fact that he's got a different metabolic requirement than you and I do, or that I do, I should say. That kid's probably eating you out of house and home. And I know for me that if I ate like that high school kid or that college kid, I definitely would not like the results the way that it would look on me. So cattle and people, we all got different metabolic requirements that we got to meet. The next challenge that we got to really worry about is diet adaptation, okay? And so when we take a calf in a receiving program, a starter calf, he's what we're going to call concentrate naive. Okay, so he's never really digested a lot of grains before. His rumen is set up to digest more forages, grass, hay, that type of stuff. And so we slowly got to build him up. And we slowly got to increase the grain tolerance that he can put together so we can get those optimal gains that we're after. Now, every now and again, I have cattlemen tell me, like, but John, why do I want to keep phasing out all this roughage in my diet? I like roughage. It's cheaper. It's cheaper to buy that hay than it is corn. And that is true up front. The sticker price of hay or roughages are going to be cheaper than what their grains are. But when we consider the actual energy content, and if we're valuing them on an energy basis, and keep in mind, energy is what's really going to dictate the gain of our cattle. And if we took 100 pounds of corn versus 100 pounds of hay, and we looked at the TDN, or the total digestible nutrients, or the percentage of that feed that is going to be used as energy, and corn versus hay, you're actually going to find that corn's a better bet. That's the more economical choice to put on gain on cattle. So yes, when I've got roughage, I can have a cheap cost of the diet, but when I look at the actual cost of gain, I'm going to be better off going with the higher concentrate because I need less feed to get those cattle to gain the same, and they're going to have less days on feed so I can turn them quick and get them to market. But we're still really going to take it slow off the front end. That's why we got to build those cattle up. That's why we need several different steps to get them to where we want to be at. And because diet adaptation, or when we're receiving cattle, that's the most stressful time of their life. All right, so you think about it. We got this calf and we just pulled him off of his mother. We weaned him. All right, and we're sending him to a brand new environment. All right, and lots of times we're sending him to a brand new environment away from home where he's commingled or going to be nose-to-nose contact through a fence line with cattle that he's never seen before. And this is almost like if you take your kids to daycare. All right, I don't know about you, but it sure seems to me when there's one kid at that daycare that gets sick, every kid gets sick. All right, and that can happen with these cattle because we're exposing them to all these new different pathogens when we got a receiving calf or during that diet adaptation phase. And so if that calf's not eating, he's way more likely to get sick. If he's got a gut ache because he ate too much corn and he goes off feed, then any little pathogen's probably going to knock him into that mortality and those morbidity columns that we definitely know to track from our bottom line. So intake's going to be important for animal health, just like Dr. Burrison just covered. Now, the other thing that we can talk about too is performance and gain, right? The more cattle eat, the more they're going to gain. And the other thing that intake is a big driver of, and particularly in these receiving cattle, is the quality grade that we're going to generate as well. Research has shown time and again, marbling deposition, this is a critical window for cattle. The first 50, 60 days we get them on feed, that's when we generally got problems with them eating. And so if we can get them started on feed, get them off to a great start, they got a lot better chance to get a rewarded quality grade when we harvest them. And so obviously intake is important. All right, so you might be asking, like, all right, so we got to get cattle to eat, we need intake. So what's going to affect the intake of a TMR? All right, well, there's several different things. Moisture level is a big one. All right, I would sure say that lots of times we get these roughages that are really dry and dusty, and that'll depress the intake of calves. Sometimes we got to add some water to those diets to kind of condition them to get them to eat more, because they got to take a lot of saliva for them to eat and swallow and chew that dry feed there. The next thing we can look at is the bulk and the physical characteristics of a diet. You can think about silage for this. Silage is a big, bulky diet, all right? And we might got a calf that's supposed to eat 15 pounds of dry matter of silage, a 5-weight calf. And since that silage is so big and bulky and it's really wet, lots of times it's 60 to 70% water, he might actually have to eat 45 to 50 pounds of feed on an as-fed basis. He just runs out of room in his rumen. He just doesn't have enough stomach capacity for him to eat all that feed. So the bulk of the diet can dictate some differences in intake as well. Ingredient quality. If you got cows, you can attest that your cows will eat a lot more good hay than they're going to eat bad hay. And your calves are the same way. If you got poor ingredients, they're not really going to want to take to the bunk quite as hard as they will if you got quality ingredients. Energy content is can help or hurt in terms of our intake potential as well. And then the inclusion of fermentable feedstuffs like silages, that can really make the diet more palatable, sometimes because it's wet and it tastes good. That fermentation, it's got a good smell to them. Obviously, we talked about molasses. That can entice cattle to eat really well as too. And so the physical form sometimes of the feed is going to make a big difference. So I got two different types of cracked corn here, okay? I've got this kind of really finely ground corn, and then I got this kind of coarse crack. And if you think about cattle, they don't really like these fines. If you ever watch a calf eat before, he's just kind of using his tongue to try to scoop that up into his mouth. And this really fine powder is tough for them. A lot of it, they don't eat as well, right? And so this coarser cracked corn like this is actually what we would be after in terms of our TMR. This is going to allow those calves to get their tongue around it, and we'll actually see improved intake when we get this coarser cracked corn. Now, all the time I have producers ask me, they're like, John, do I really need to crack my corn? Can I get away with just go ahead and feeding this stuff right here, this whole corn? What's the difference going to be between whole corn and cracked corn? And the answer is yes. If you got the capability, please crack your corn, all right? Now, when we crack corn, we're going to see an 8 to 10% improvement in average daily gain in our cattle, okay? Now, the reason because that is all the energy in the corn is in the inside. It's the starch on the inside, okay? But that starch is protected by a hard outer protein exterior, okay? And so by breaking that outer protein exterior, as soon as that kernel gets into the rumen, those starch digesting bugs can start breaking it down, okay, immediately, all right? It's almost like if you're building a house. All right, so if you're building a house, would you have everybody show up on day one? Would you have the guy that's going to wire the electricity show up the same time as the guy that's going to build the foundation? No, you're not, right? It's going to take time to build that foundation, get your walls up, your drywall, and it's the same time when it comes to cracking corn. Lots of times when we feed whole corn, all right, we just don't have enough time to break down that outer shell, and you'll see those whole kernels of corn in the manure of those cattle. And you can tell you didn't get hardly any of that, the nutrient value when that happens. So please crack your corn, and particularly on a TMR, we want that coarse crack. And then if you got the ultimate in digestibility, I'd be looking at this guy right here. This is steamed flake corn. And so steamed flake corn is really good because we're adding moisture to it, and then we flake it. We're going to hydrolyze some of those starch matrices that are indigestible there, and we're actually going to improve digestibility of the diet by, maybe anywhere from 5 to 7% with steamed flake corn. A similar process that's going to happen in dry rolled. Now, some bigger yards can do that. Obviously, a lot of our show feed diets have got that. If you don't have that capability, that's fine. We can make cracked corn work perfect for you as well. So that's going to lead me to my second principle in terms of building a balanced TMR diet. And that's that we need to customize a ration based around your outfit's feedstuff capabilities and management as well. And so, as we get started, and I'm trying to make a recommendation on a balancer, we've got to develop a game plan. So the first thing I might look at is your facilities. Do you want to bunk feed these calves, or do we got a self feeder? What program are we going to, what are our objectives there? Then we might look at our equipment too. Do we got a grinder mixer? Do I got a tub grinder? What's our storage capabilities? Do we have overhead bins? Do we have bulk capacity? Are we set up for liquid? All those things are going to help us come up with a program that we can customize to empower your cattle to maximize their genetic potential for gain. The next thing we'll look at is what are our objectives, right? Do we just say, hey, we're kicking these things out on grass. I'm going to supplement them. I want them to gain 2 pounds a day. Or is it, hey, we're selling these things October 1st. They got to hit this weight window. Or, hey, we're selling them October 1st. Let's get the most pounds on them that we possibly can. Either of those things or any, let us know what your objectives are, then we can customize a program to help you suit your needs. And then finally, obviously, we're going to talk about your available feedstuffs too, right? That's going to be really important for us to develop the right kind of ration for you. And what we can actually do at Purina is we can actually calculate a least cost diet for you as well. So we can find the most cost-effective way for you to get all the nutrients that your calves need to optimize their performance. All right? And so that leads right in perfectly to kind of my third principle of constructing a TMR diet. And that is Purina has a full line of research-tested and field-proven options that'll work for you no matter your environment or your special circumstances. All right? So lots of times when I talk to stockers, I talk to guys that got grow yards, they'll tell me, you know, John, I see these big guys, these big feedlots and these really big stockers. They're all paying this nutritional consultant to come out and to build their diets for them and help to manage their calves. And if I'm going to be competitive, I'm going to compete with them big boys, I got to go pay an individual consultant too. So the great thing about Purina is when you buy one of our products, you get full access to our team of technical consultants, just like myself, just like my colleagues, Dr. Bursons and Dr. Doug Hawkins, all right? And I can speak from my experience and tell you that one of my favorite things that I get to do in my job is to build diet for guys that are stockers and growers, all right? We want to help you. We want to help you troubleshoot some of the pitfalls that you got. We want to help with the management standpoint. We definitely want to make sure that we can help you hit your objectives and your performance targets there. We want to customize a program that is going to allow you to be successful in the cattle business. And in very special circumstances, let's say if you've got a set of feedstuffs that are very unique, we can even build a custom balancer if we need to fit your cattle's, to fit your objectives and your expectations, all right? The other great thing about it is when you make a purchase with Purina is you get access to our full service sales team. And these guys live in your market. All right, so they can stop by and making sure that the program is being implemented and that the product is doing what we need to. And even more importantly, they can collect ingredient samples for us, all right? Because before I build a diet, I want to make sure that I've got the nutrient composition of the feedstuffs that you're using so I can tailor make your feed program to allow your cattle to perform at their optimal level. All right, so when it comes to balancers, we've really got two different options here. We got our self-fed balancers and we got our hand-fed balancers. Now, most of us are probably, if we're thinking about a TMR, going to fall in that hand-fed target, but we'll maybe touch on self-fed just to begin with. And when we talk about self-fed, we're going to be talking about our AccuRation portfolio of products there, okay? Now, AccuRation is really cool. Dr. Hawkins will touch on this as well, but AccuRation has got our snack eating technology, okay? And so what that does, we got modifiers in that feed to make sure that instead of those calves eating one big, huge meal, they eat 5, 6, or maybe even more small meals throughout the day so that they don't ever get a gut ache, all right? I don't know about you, but if I go to the buffet and I tank up, what I want to do is I go home and I lay down and I kind of bellyache for a while, and it might be 2, 3, 4 days before I start eating normally again. I might not eat anything for the next 48 hours because I got a gut ache. Well, your cattle are no different. If they go and they eat too much at one time, they get a gut ache, they get off feed, then they're way more likely to get sick and allow one of those pathogens to escape their gut and to really cause havoc in terms of what their health response is going to be. So we can make sure that our cattle are going to be healthier and we can bolster their performance with our snack eating technology. So if you've got corn and you've got cottonseed hulls, we can set you up and we can build some forage extender for you. If you just got corn, we can make our cattle limiters for you. We obviously got our AccuRation grower and our AccuRation finisher for those guys that want to do grind and mix and definitely some capabilities there. So those are great options that we can definitely do for you. But as I mentioned before, most of us are probably more interested in hand feeding. And so that's going to come down to 3 different things. We got a mineral for hand feeding for a balancer. We can do a dry, which is going to be like our steak maker portfolio, which would be kind of a pellet or a meal. And then third, we got our liquid options as well. So if we just talk about those a little bit, we'll start with our mineral, okay? And so the thing with mineral is that our mineral is formulated to meet all the vitamin and mineral needs of those calves. It's not going to add any protein. It's certainly not going to add any fat. We can maybe put a few feed additives in there if we want to. But the problem with this is even though it is formulated to meet all the vitamin and mineral needs of your calves, the implementation can be a little bit tough. So we get a chance to look at this mineral here. You can see it's a very fine particle, okay? So you can imagine I need to get 4 ounces of this into every calf a day, maybe 2 to 4 ounces depending on the particular SKU of mineral that we're looking at. Well, since it's such a fine particle, you can imagine taking 1 pound or 150-pound bag of this and adding into 2,000 pounds of might be corn, and maybe we've got silage or maybe cottonseed hulls, and maybe we got whatever your feedstuffs ingredients are. Well, those are big bulky feedstuffs. And so we kind of get that mixer going, and all of a sudden these small particles start to fall and they start to settle. And before you know it, all that mineral is way below the arm of the mixer in that truck, okay? And so what ends up happening is, even though it's formulated to meet the calf needs, maybe that first group of calves that you feed, they're getting 5-6 times their requirement of mineral because all that mineral settled to the bottom end of the truck, and then, we got a problem there. And then the calves at the very end of the day you're feeding, they might not be getting hardly any mineral at all. And so the practical limitations of minerals is part of the reason that I wouldn't recommend you using that for a balancer, and because we just can't add any protein or soluble sugars or some of those extras that we really want to do. Our second option is going to be a dry option, and that's going to be our steak maker products here. Okay, so we can either go with a meal or a pellet. And the great thing about this is we can find, based on your feedstuffs, if we got finer feedstuffs, maybe we'd recommend the meal. If we got a little coarser feedstuff, we can recommend this pellet so we can get a little even blend here. These are going to be targeted at 1 to 2 pound fed rate. Most of them are going to be a pound or a pound and a half. And not only do they got all the vitamin and minerals that we need in this pellet, but we're also adding a protein source. All right, and we can pick the protein source that is going to best complement the existing protein that you got in your diet to optimize the performance and make sure that that symmetry is right between protein digested in the rumen and protein digested in the small intestine. And then obviously this is going to allow for more effective mixing because of the size of it. And if you imagine they need to eat a pound and a half of this, a lot easier to deliver that than maybe just 2 ounces and getting the right, or 2 to 4 ounces and get the right kind of mix there that we're after. And then obviously we can add feed additives to this. I would tell you anytime you can add rumensin, I would add rumensin. The data is pretty clear. Bovitec or rumensin, particularly once we get those cattle started, I like rumensin. Rumensin generally improves our feed efficiency by 4%. And then past your initial investment, that's going to generate a return on investment of $23 a head. So it's one of the best bets you can make in the cattle business. All right, and then finally we got our liquid option, and this is going to be our Super Licks Feedlot 40. And so here is kind of get you a chance to look at this. Most of us maybe have never had a chance to see this liquid molasses before, but man, there's a lot of advantages with liquid, okay? The first thing we can talk about is just the form that it's delivered in, right? It's very palatable. With molasses, it tastes good, so that's going to entice those calves to eat it. And because of its liquid, we can condition the diet. We can offset some of the dust and some of the dryness that's lots of times in some of our forage particles. When we're adding, maybe 7 to 8% of the diet being that liquid, you can imagine we make it really, really palatable that way. It's also got a lot of soluble sugars in there. We talked about that strengthening gut health and integrity and improving the lining of the rumen so we can set that rumen up to digest more efficiently. And then the other great thing that we have is we got it's a suspended technology here, okay? So because this is a suspended liquid, it's just kind of a fancy way of saying that it doesn't settle, okay? So we're not going to end up at a point where all the protein's at the bottom, all the minerals here, and then everything else is there. Since it's suspended, we really ensure, we spent a lot of money to come up with this technology to make sure that we get the equal distribution of that 40% protein, that vitamin and mineral pack, and then all those soluble sugars. And so when we create that, and then we start mixing that, it's a sticky, obviously, liquid that way, we can really get just a really uniform mix when we're creating a TMR. All right, and then, obviously we got the rumensin and the Thailand option available in this liquid 40. And then something I'm really excited with that we just came out with, it's an industry exclusive for us at Purina, is that we've got our ProPath SKU. All right, so some of you probably are familiar with ZenPro or Avail4. And ZenPro, they kind of share our love of research. At Purina, it's not just good enough for our products to work at our research center. We want to make sure they work at your farm or they work at independently verified research settings from around the country. So ZenPro has more research backed up by university studies from all around the country than any other mineral supplier. So that's why we've got such a great relationship with those guys. And we like Avail4 because it's an organic trace mineral, but ProPath is the next generation of that Avail4, and it's actually even got higher bioavailability, the ultimate in bioavailability. And if you look at some of our studies that have come out, the Iowa State released a study the other day about zinc supplementation, how zinc allows for more effective use of your implants to be more effective and beta agonists and more efficient gain. Obviously that's going to be really important. So this is an industry exclusive. The only place you can get ProPath, and particularly in a liquid option for a feedlot, is in this Feedlot 40. So for my money, I'm going to tell you, if you're set up to have liquid, Feedlot 40 is the way to go. And if maybe you could entertain getting it too, because it's the one that I've had the best results with the customers that I get to work with. So in closing, I'm going to reiterate one more time my 3 keys for ration balancing. First, our commodities are just inherently deficient, and we got to provide a supplement to create a balanced ration. Second is we need to customize, all right? We need to leverage your feedstuff availability and your management capabilities to customize a feeding program that is going to optimize the performance of your cattle. And then our third take-home message is that Purina has a full line of research-tested and field-proven options that will work for you no matter your special circumstances. All right, so I hope you enjoyed my presentation here and maybe added some questions. We'd love to discuss this when we get our roundtable discussion here. But with that, let us know if you got any questions. I'm actually going to kick it over to my colleague, Dr. Doug Hawkins, and Dr. Hawkins is going to talk a little bit about providing a supplementation for grazing cattle, and particularly vitamin and minerals in that regard.